Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Darryl Grove, and on today's show I am joined by Adam Whittaker Snavely. You may know Adam as a writer for The Athletic. I think we talk quite often on this show about his famous panic rankings that he publishes at The Athletic. Today we'll be talking about Borussia Dortmund, a team that Adam watches every week and is very familiar with. We really get into what the team now looks like under Lucien Favre, how they are top of the Bundesliga, and of course we talk Christian Pulisic. It's not all Christian Pulisic, but there's a big chunk of Christian Pulisic chat in the middle of this episode. I'll put it in the timestamps if you're only here for the Pulisic content. Also, a bit of full disclosure. Obviously, long-time listeners will know that the Total Soccer Show is sponsored by The Athletic. Just want to make very clear that this interview with Adam is in no way part of that deal. It's just that we like Adam's writing and we wanted to talk to someone who knew all about Dortmund. So without further ado, let's talk some Borussia Dortmund. So I am joined by Adam Whittaker Snavely. Adam, welcome to the Total Soccer Show.
Hey, what's up, Darryl? Thanks for having me.
Of course. My first question for you, your 3 names is too long, it's a lot of syllables. Can I call you Snaves?
That is my Twitter name.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, please feel free.
I really like it. It's really catchy, and I saw it was your Twitter handle, but it felt maybe a little too familiar to just call you Snaves straight away.
That has been, honestly, that's been a nickname that's followed pretty much everybody in my family.
Okay.
Even since I was a little kid, and I was just the first family member on Twitter, I guess.
So you said it's been in your family a long time. Are you like Snaves the 14th?
Oh yeah, we follow the very strict number formations.
Well, we will be speaking about formations today when we talk Borussia Dortmund. But first, I want to sort of introduce our listeners to you. So to give our listeners a bit of the background, I met you in, I want to say May, in Philadelphia as part of a sort of, I'm going to call it a retreat that George Qureshi put together for writers for The Athletic. So that was the first time I met you.
A little writer vacation.
Yeah, writer vacation. We got some work done as well, right? We got some work done as well. But I wanted to sort of ask you about your career because, you know, as I understand it, you're a sort of young soccer writer. You know, you're not like a 50-year career journalist. So would you mind just giving people the sort of background on sort of what it is that you do? Yeah.
So the term soccer writer, soccer journalist is still a relatively new one
for you.
Like when it's used to describe me. My career and my writing and the things that I've done, for the vast majority of it, is best described as blogging. I was somebody who I have a writing background. I've done a lot of different types of creative writing. And actually, my very first publications before I started really branching into nonfiction and sports writing and stuff was I actually have a bunch of poetry publications.
Do you know what? I can see, you know, your use of imagery and stuff when you do the panic rankings, which I'm sure long-time listeners to our show will know about because we always reference them when we do our Athletic ad reads. And just so you know, there'll be a whole full disclosure thing in the intro about how we're interviewing an Athletic writer. I think your use of imagery suggests someone who's done some poetry.
Yeah. And it's something that's kind of, you know, like that was the first really form of writing that I really got into. And I still write it. So that is my gateway into writing was poetry first and foremost. And then I got my start, and the place where I really started writing about soccer was some of the SB Nation sites.
Yeah, it's been a great sort of academy for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say enough good things about the people that I worked with at SB Nation, both the other writers and any the brass that I came in contact with and I worked with. I know that there is. It was like a year or two ago, there was a hubbub about how SB Nation didn't pay the writers enough or stuff like that. And I kind of realized what I was getting into when I moved from a guy that was just posting a bunch of satirical articles in their little fan post section where anybody can come and post. And I just got noticed by some editors who asked me to come write for sites.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. And I wasn't expecting to get paid because it was already something that I was doing for fun. I've loved soccer my entire life. And so, and I like writing. So this was just something that I did for fun, and being able to kind of write for sites and get my name out there was cool, but I also wasn't expecting to be paid a salary. This was already something that I was doing.
Yeah.
And nobody leveled an expectation of you're going to write this many a week or something like that. And nobody told me that I was going to get paid. Like, that was never even like a promise to me.
So how did that then turn into The Athletic?
Well, pretty much what happened was I was writing for a few SB Nation sites. I started writing. I did a few things for Dirty South Soccer right when that launched, and I also helped to launch. I helped launch Fear the Wall, the Borussia Dortmund SB Nation community, and then kind of the thing that got me really noticed more than anything else was when I started writing for Stars and Stripes FC, which is all of the U.S. soccer teams that and coverage there.
Yeah, Kim McCauley heavily involved there as well, right?
Yeah, I haven't. I know of Kim, and I haven't worked with her like a ton. Or actually, I don't know if I ever actually worked with her. We speak on Twitter sometimes. I mostly worked with people like Rob Usri. Oh yeah, of course. Steph Yang, who does a lot of women's soccer stuff. Donald Wine, and I worked a little bit with Jeremiah Osham, who is kind of one of the head guys for all of the SB Nation soccer sites. But I ran this series, and it was basically I saw this series that Dirty South Soccer was running. This guy, his name's Sam Jones, that he was kind of doing this thing called the Hater's Guide to, and it was kind of basically like a riff on a match preview where you just like would be basically it was they would take teams that your team was playing that Atlanta was playing, and kind of give you what the 4-1-1 was on that team, but did it from a very specific point of view. And it was
it's
funny
kind of like a roast, right? It's almost like roast the upcoming opposition. Yeah,
very, very much so. And I kind of thought to myself, well, that's really fun. That's a really fun way to do that and a different thing. And so we were kind of looking for something of a column or something of a series for Stars and Stripes. And I pitched it to him. I was like, what if I kind of took this idea and applied it to more of a weekly news roundup kind of thing, both inside and outside of U.S. soccer, where I just gave a spin on the news that was more not satirical per se, but from like I played this character that was just super angry / salty at whatever was happening, and we called it the Toxic Talk. And basically I did that for a while, and it was fun. And sometimes it went over well with the commentators. Sometimes the commenters were very not pleased with what I wrote, and that's just the way that goes when you're writing that style. But basically one day, I got a call from, George, Krejci, who is the lead editor of The Athletic, who, and I guess, Brooks Peck, who's, one of the other editors, kind of put him onto my stuff when he was looking for writers to kind of launch the Athletics' more national soccer vertical that they were doing, and he asked me to write, and it has just kind of evolved from there into going from just a blogger / just a commenter who was putting his own stuff in a section that was devoted to letting fans write whatever they wanted, to turning writing into a career and making it into something that I was kind of like building upon and not just doing for fun.
Got it. So the thing is, though, now you are not writing as much about Borussia Dortmund, right? Because
I am not writing as much.
Yeah. So I really wanted to get you on here. So, I mean, I'd love to just spend an hour talking to you about panic rankings, but that maybe it's better to just read them and enjoy them, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to say, I mean, the panic rankings are fun. And they were kind of born from what I was already doing with the Toxic Talk. That was actually a series that George and Brooks pitched to me of like, what if we did a riff on power? What if we did a riff on the power rankings, kind of all what you were already doing at Stars and Stripes FC?
Yeah.
And it was just an opportunity for me to disguise analysis and this very well-worn trope of a power ranking, which is typically kind of boring.
Yes, agree. 100% agree.
And it's just kind of like a way for a writer to give their opinion. That's it. And I said, well, what if I did that? But I made it weird and funny and even obscure at times with some of the references. And just to do something different, just to try something that was, that wasn't really done as much in the soccer world. And a lot of people responded really well to it. A lot of people love it. There are some people out there who detest it.
Yeah.
With every fiber of their being.
I think I tweeted yesterday that you've accidentally designed a sense of humor test. And just reading the panic rankings is a test for the absence or presence of a sense of humor based on people's comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it being not for everybody. When people are saying, well, there are people who think like, oh, like the writer is trying too hard to be funny. And I kind of think to myself, like, well, obviously I'm trying very hard to be funny here. It's just like, this is supposed to be a humor column first and foremost. But I don't know. It's a lot of people. Some people just don't want their team to be made fun of, or
I think that's it.
They're not a fan of somebody coming in obviously being sarcastic or ridiculous. To which I say, then just maybe root for a better team. I don't know. Like, you're in America, the home of the free and the land of the fair weather fan. Like, you can do whatever you want.
You can support Barcelona if you want, or you can support Borussia Dortmund. So I want to.
Borussia Dortmund.
I'm doing a hard pivot into our Borussia Dortmund conversation, but I want to ask you the personal thing first. My assumption is that you became a Borussia Dortmund watcher, and I assume fan, because of Christian Pulisic. Is that basically the story?
That's actually not the story.
Ooh, okay. I was hoping that was the answer.
Like, it's similar. The story is similar, but it actually predates Pulisic by a couple of years. I really became aware. I knew of Borussia Dortmund, and I had seen them, especially after when you're getting into like Jurgen Klopp's second and third years there, and they kind of became more of a more known entity to the American public, which to that point in time kind of had, and to a certain degree still has, very much a heavy bias towards the Premier League in England and La Liga, possibly to a lesser extent some things in France and Italy. Germany was kind of a not very well-known league in general, past Bayern Munich, basically.
So is this you being a hipster? Like, I'm going to go watch some German soccer?
No, you got to see the Dortmund and Bayern Munich Champions League final, which is really cool. But I really started paying attention to them when they signed an American kid by the name of Junior Flores.
Yeah.
Who was a DC product, and he was the U17. He was a U17, the class before Pulisic really came onto the scene with the US U17s. He was a part of the team that eventually, and the class that eventually would put out players like Paul Areola, Kellen Acosta.
Yeah. So is that maybe 2013 Under-17 World Cup?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yeah. Which I don't think the U.S. actually qualified for the U17 tournament that time. But basically, he had there was one year, I want to say it was 2011, 2012. Junior Flores has had an outstanding Nike Friendlies tournament, which is kind of the, for the youth program and specifically for the U17s. It's one of like their highlights of the year.
Yeah.
Where they have the Nike Friendly tournaments in Bradenton, Florida. And he had just an outstanding tournament. And he kind of piggybacked off of that when he turned 18 and signed with Borussia Dortmund. And there was kind of a big to-do about how he had kind of made this decision. There was some help from Borussia Dortmund's part, talking him into it, from Neven Subotic, who played for U.S. youth teams before going on to represent Serbia, I believe, or Bosnia, maybe Bosnia. I can't remember, and I feel ashamed now. But he was a guy who was a dual international and had played for the U.S. at youth levels and had helped Junior Flores. And Junior Flores never really panned out at Borussia Dortmund. He's actually still there.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
Still signed to their second team, but he kind of never really played. And you also, at that point in time, you had Terrence Boyd, who was still with Borussia Dortmund's second team, and he was kind of lighting it up for them. And it was right before he moved to Austria to kind of go find his own way. Joe Zhao kind of made his way through the ranks and actually did make a first-team appearance for Borussia Dortmund in the Bundesliga. So you had a few American guys that were going on. And so that was what got me to Borussia Dortmund. But what really attracted me as a person to actually cheer for them and to follow them and to root for them, more than anything else, was the fans. I was really, really attracted to just the sheer insanity of Borussia Dortmund's fans and the yellow wall, the atmosphere at Signal Iduna Park. It was just crazy and something that was really, really fun to watch and neat to see. And you could see how connected the players were to that, and how it felt like a more intimate connection between the community and the club than perhaps a lot of other big clubs might have. And so that was what really started me and got me going. And in terms of any sort of fandom with Borussia Dortmund.
Got it. All right, I want to fast forward us into the present, right? So
absolutely,
yeah. So you were in there with Jurgen Klopp. Since then, we've had the sort of up and down reign of Thomas Tuchel, the down reign of Peter Bosz, and the middling reign of Sturger. We are now in the Lucien Favre era. My first question: am I pronouncing that correctly?
As far as I can tell, yes.
Okay.
I will be the first to say that my German and my Swiss and my French are not awesome. But I think that Lucien Favre is as close as I'm going to get to the correct pronunciation of that name.
Okay, so yeah, we'll both agree on that then. And right now, Dortmund are top of the Bundesliga, ahead of Bayern Munich, under Lucien Favre. Actually, right now, as we're recording, they're also playing in the DFB Pokal, right? So I won't spoil the score for you.
I pulled it up. Actually, right as you called me, Christian Pulisic scored a goal. So.
Hey, all right. Well, so we'll definitely talk some Pulisic later. My big question, the first question is, what has Lucien Favre changed in terms of how Dortmund are playing? Essentially, why has he been able to make this team seemingly more consistently successful, at least over this first sort of quarter of the season?
Right. So Dortmund for a long time have been defined by what Jurgen Klopp did with the club, which was kind of bring it off the back of the near financial collapse, bringing Dortmund as a team back to the forefront of German soccer, where they had been in especially in the late 90s. And he kind of became this rock star coach by introducing this thing that everybody calls the Gegenpress. Yeah. Which is just, it's counter pressing. It is all that it is. And
actually, can I stop you there? Because I'm really interested in this. Why was he able to? I'm assuming he didn't do it deliberately, but do you have any idea of like why it got weirdly branded that way? Do you know what I mean? Like, why was it special to Klopp when other teams had counter-pressed before?
It was just honestly, it was the part of it was kind of the sexiness of here's this club that is returning and kind of came out of nowhere with all of these young players, this youngish coach.
Yeah.
And it was happening at the same time that you were kind of obsessed with systems and the name for the systems, and tiki-taka was everything still at that point in time. I mean, if you're thinking 2008, 2010, 2012, and that 2010 to 2012 was right when Klopp and Dortmund were becoming a massive thing. That's the end of the international reign of Spain. 2010, they win the World Cup. 2012, they do the double for the Euro, and they win the 3 back-to-back tournaments. And this whole idea of like death by a million passes is so attractive to so many people. And honestly, I think it was just an attempt to be another version of that, similar to like how you had, in Spain, you have El Clasico with FC Barcelona versus Real Madrid. You start to see the game between Dortmund and Bayern Munich referred to as Der Klassiker.
Yeah.
Which wasn't really like a natural thing. It was more of like we're going to try to market this own, like the German El Clasico, basically. I think it was just kind of like the sexiness of the term and the team at the time that really made that what it was and kind of caused the obsession with that term.
Got it. That makes sense. Sorry, I've sidetracked us a bit, but we were saying that Klopp essentially became synonymous with that style. Then how do we get from there to what Favre is doing today?
Yeah, so you had this big cult of personality around Klopp, and then to a certain extent, other players that were playing under him. And a lot of what Borussia Dortmund continued to do, although not to the same extent after Klopp left, and there were tweaks made by managers. Obviously, Tuchel had his own spin, just as Peter Bosz had his own spin, and Peter Stoger was doing whatever that Stoger was doing. That there was still a very big sense of like the press is who we are, and the lightning quick, constant motion, kinetic energy counterattack is what Borussia Dortmund does, and that's what they're most successful at. It's almost like there was this mentality that's similar to, I almost liken it to being a fan of Brazil's soccer team, the Brazilian national team, which, because my mother is from Brazil, so I'm closer to this than some other people with. When you're in Brazil, it's not enough to just win. You have to win the Brazilian way, and you have this whole kind of high, almost the mythos of the Brazilian team and the Brazilian teams of past and how they, you had all these creative players and you had all these wizards on the ball and how it seemed like they always knew where their teammates were. They had eyes in the back of their head. That lightning fast, super, always counterattacking kind of style became synonymous with a lot of what Dortmund was doing. Lucien Favre came in, and I think the first thing that he really set out to do was to find more balance in the midfield and the defense by making sure that the defensive shape was a little bit more solid and a little bit less risk-taking in how it moved and how it formed and how it formulated. I
remember, especially under Peter Bosz, the very, very high line that just was really dangerous, right? And it got broken so many times, and they kept going with it. So you're saying essentially Favre is just way more conservative, or at least not as sort of kamikaze as Bosz was.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you had the years after Klopp were most marked by Dortmund losing all these players that made the team what it was under Klopp.
Yeah.
So you lose Mats Hummels, you lose Henrik Mkhitaryan, you lose Ilkay Gundogan, and you lose all these players, and you get to a point where Peter Bosz was coming in, and he had become this hot coaching talent on the back of a super high line attacking style with all these really, really great young players at Ajax. and he comes in and he tries to adopt a similar style, but he does it with playing center back, Socrates Papastathopoulos and Omer Toprak. Like it's not the same players that you have. They don't have the same recovery ability. They don't have the same speed as some of your younger players do. And so Lucien Favre and the style that he has adopted at Dortmund, it's taken a couple of different iterations. A lot of the earlier in the year, he was putting out straight up 4-1-4-1s with three central midfielders and no real attacking midfielder. He's kind of since moved more back to a 4-2-3-1 with a more traditional attacking midfielder, but one that has the understanding that he's probably going to need to have to come back and defend at times as well. Can
I stop you there to ask, can I assume that Marco Reus is that traditional attacking midfielder, or is it Mario Götze? Who's playing that role?
If Paco Alcacer is healthy, Marco Reus is playing that role. If he is not healthy, which has happened quite frequently, then it's more of a toss-up. It could be Götze, it could be still Marco Reus. If you're going to play Maxi Philipp at the forward position, it's usually one of those two people.
Got it. And who are the defensive midfielders? I assume it's always Axel Witsel, because every time I've seen Dortmund this year, to me he's looked like the boss of the entire midfield.
Axel Witsel is the guy who has come in and kind of put his stamp on the midfield. Obviously, the popular pairing the last few weeks, and the one that was so effective, particularly against Atletico Madrid, which is the best team that Dortmund has played this year, was the pairing of Witsel and Mo Dahoud. And Dahoud is an interesting character. I sometimes think about him, I'm going to qualify this statement heavily, in a very specific way. I think about Mo Dahoud in a similar way to the way that I thought about Jermaine Jones, which is that you had a player that obviously had quality, but you also didn't know what you were going to get game to game with him. And he's kind of, with Mo Dahoud, he has a lot more potential for attacking prowess and game-breaking ability than Jermaine Jones does. But it also still feels like at any given moment, Mo Dahoud might just like go and make a horror challenge on somebody. He's definitely a midfielder that plays with a lot of aggression.
Is he still young enough for that to be forgivable? Where's he at? He's like early 20s, right? Yeah,
he's still a young guy. Mo Dahoud became a pretty hot German prospect when he was very young, like he was 20 years old. And he's still definitely a younger person. Yeah, he's 22 years old now. So that is, at this point, forgivable. I think that you want guys like Axel Witsel and Thomas Delaney to kind of show him the way and guide him a little bit in terms of like being smarter with where you can be dirty and where you need to back off.
Yeah. Witsel to me seems really good at that.
Yes. Witsel, he's a good organizer. He keeps the midfield ticking. He's just a guy that knows, and up to this point with Dortmund, he's been very good at knowing where to be. He is very good at breaking lines with passes, and a lot of the time what has ended up happening is when it's clear that Axel Witsel is taking the game over and an opposing team is starting to try to like mark him more heavily, that's when you need a guy like your other defensive midfielder to really step up and become the guy that can carry the ball into space. And in terms of
need a spare Axel.
Yeah. And in terms of Dortmund's other holding midfielders, Julian Weigl and Thomas Delaney, they're not those guys. Mo Dahoud is the other guy that can be the person who, if you're going to give me space, I'm going to eat up the ground and I'm going to take the space.
Yeah.
And I'm going to mix it up in the midfield. He's really that guy. So that's why that has become such a popular pairing, because Witsel can take over that game. But if he starts to get marked out of the game, if they try to really squeeze him and make sure that he isn't getting any space, then Mo Dahoud is still a person who can really carry the ball forward and break the lines and get the ball to that front four, whoever that front four might be.
Hey, this is Daryl cutting in with an ad read. Today's sponsor is Roughneck Scarves. And it's Major League Soccer themed because we tweeted out the question, if you were to design a custom Roughneck Scarves scarf to represent the start of the MLS 2018 playoffs, what would it look like? Before I read you some of the answers, Roughneck Scarves is the official scarf provider for US Soccer, Major League Soccer and USL and NCAA, but you can also get custom designed scarves that you can then sell yourself to fundraise for your organization or soccer team, or, just for fun. So here are your MLS 2018 playoff themed custom scarves. Clint Demogorgon said, a lion eating a sad Zlatan. A lot of Zlatan not making the playoff references in the responses to this question. DGB says it would be twice as long as it should be, which I think is a reference to the length of the playoffs. There's an international break in the middle, right? Jeff Huffman says side one would have Greg Berhalter and Tata Martino staring at each other in Columbus versus Atlanta. Side two would have Greg Berhalter and Tata Martino staring at each other, USA versus Mexico. Thank you to everybody who sent in responses. If you'd like to go to roughneckscarves.com, any scarf you see there, you can get 20% off if you use the discount code Total Soccer Show at checkout. Discount code Total Soccer Show, all one word, for 20% off any scarf you see at checkout. Or there's no discount, but you can do the custom scarves and you will get a really good profit margin. We know because we did it for the World Cup Comedy Tour. They created great scarves for us. So thank you to Roughneck Scarves for sponsoring today's show. Now back to my interview with Snaves. So that's a good transition point to talk Christian Pulisic, because I'll bet, so I think we're about 20 minutes in or so, there are going to be people screaming, talk about Christian Pulisic, talk about Christian Pulisic.
Talk about him.
Yeah, so let's
is
get...
his career over?
Yeah, so that's the big question is the rise of Jadon Sancho. Sancho keeps scoring goals, right? Like he scored 2 at the weekend against Hertha. I think he scored 1 against Atletico when he came on. Should we be worried about Christian Pulisic being supplanted by Jadon Sancho?
Well, you don't have to be worried because you play for both teams.
Yeah. Should 50% of me be worried about Christian Pulisic?
Yeah. Here's the thing. And I also saw on Twitter people saying, should Dortmund play Pulisic and Sancho at the same time? And I think that the Lucien Favre's common move has been to start one or the other and then bring that other player in for the other as a substitution, which is such an unfair substitution either way it happens. Like you take off either one of those and bring in the other person in replacement.
Wait, is that unfair on the players themselves or on the opposition?
On the opposition. It feels like such a oh great, we have to face the other one now. And it's worked both ways where you have one person who hasn't been effective. Like in the last couple of weeks, I think that Christian Pulisic hasn't been as effective, certainly as he has wanted to be. And you bring Jadon Sancho in and he immediately scores. Earlier in the campaign, particularly in the game against Hoffenheim, Dortmund were a man down. You bring Christian Pulisic in for Jadon Sancho, and he changes the game for Dortmund and gets the goal for them and is absolutely their best player on the field. It's a really, really great substitution to make. People are wondering, can they coexist? Could they play at the same time? The answer is definitely yes. The answer is they could definitely patrol both wings. I think that Favre has avoided that because he knows that both players are players that want to, they want to challenge defenders. They want to get up in the attack. And I think that usually they're more often paired on the other side of the field with people like Marius Wolf, who played wing back last year for Eintracht Frankfurt, or Jakob Brun-Larsen, who is another person who has just a massive work rate and a huge engine. People who can really, he's played Rafael Guerreiro there, who plays left back for Portugal. People who might be a little bit more defensive minded. I see. So Favre balances it out, so he doesn't have 2 all-out attacking wingers. He always has one of Sancho and Pulisic and one more defensive winger. Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that there's a winger that is going to be very responsible defensively and put in a lot of work on that side of the ball.
Yeah.
Even though I think that Christian Pulisic's defensive work is a little bit underrated. I think that he is somebody who works hard on both sides of the ball. But to the original question of, should we be worried about Jadon Sancho stealing Christian Pulisic's shine, or if that's bad for him? Ultimately, I don't think it's terrible for him. They're both players in really similar stages of their careers. They're still both extremely young. They're still both finding their way at the professional level. I mean, Christian Pulisic has 100 Bundesliga games to his name, which is a ridiculous number for somebody that is at his age. He's still only 20 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that it makes it easy to forget, when we talk about Christian Pulisic, like he is the centerpiece that he is for his national team, like somebody who is very experienced with the Bundesliga, he's still a player that's developing. Like, Christian Pulisic still is not a finished product here. And I think that the competition and the ability to play with these people and to continue learning from them ultimately is going to be a good thing for Christian Pulisic. Dortmund has enough games. They're going to be playing enough games and have enough minutes that Christian Pulisic is still going to be on the field. He's on the field still currently right now in the DFB Pokal for Dortmund, playing right now. And obviously, playing against Union Berlin is not the same as playing against Hertha or playing against Atletico Madrid. But he's there, and he's getting his games. And I think that, the concern that Jadon Sancho is taking Pulisic's spot, or that the rise of Jadon Sancho is going to stunt Christian Pulisic's growth in some sort of way, is a bit overblown here, especially considering the fact that even though Jadon Sancho has been getting a lot of minutes and has been scoring, popping up in the right places and finding himself in good situations, Christian Pulisic is still playing. He's still getting in. Like, it's not like it's cutting in so significantly into his playing time that he is all of a sudden going to go by the wayside here at Dortmund.
Yeah, and I think I've just realised that a lot of people may be worried when they just see, say, this weekend Sancho started, I think, right? But if you look at bigger picture, that's probably because Pulisic started midweek against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, which is definitely a tougher game, and Pulisic got the nod ahead of Sancho there. So there's definitely a back and forth in that way. So it's not as if... Basically, I'm saying I think people shouldn't panic when they see... Just on one sample Bundesliga weekend, you see Sancho selected ahead of Pulisic. You can't just take that as evidence that he is rated higher by Lucien Favre or someone else.
Yeah, and I think there's, it's easy to get concerned, like when you see like Sancho is putting up crazy numbers, and which he is, and it's pretty impressive, and you don't see Pulisic matching him, and to a certain extent, Pulisic hasn't really matched that pace in his career as of yet, but I still also think, like Christian Pulisic is been slightly inconsistent to start the season. I think right now he's in a spot where he's a player that loves to go at people. He loves to dribble. He loves to beat people. And I think that right now at Dortmund, he might be just trying to do a little bit too much the last couple of times I've watched him.
Even wasn't the Axel Witsel goal? I think it's a good deflection, but he still got the credit against Atletico Madrid. Doesn't that start with a weird, like, Christian Pulisic dribble infield where he basically gets tackled but gets lucky and the ball spills to another Dortmund player? It
is. He basically he beats like two or three defenders, and then the ball kind of ricochets, and it ricochets off a defender's leg, back off of Pulisic's leg, and then I'll back out wide. And I think there was another Dortmund player that got a touch before Axel Witsel actually shot the ball.
Definitely. I think it might be Dahoud, if memory serves. But yeah, my point is just that could have gone wrong, right? That could have been just he lost the ball. Oh yeah,
absolutely. And I think that that it's just, again, he's still a young player. He's still a player who's trying to trying to figure out his place in the squad. He's with his fourth manager in the space of a year and a half.
Yeah.
And which is a lot. It's that's a ton to deal with. He is dealing still with the fact that he is the face of the U.S. national team and has been the face of the U.S. national team since he was 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's a lot for a person that age to deal with. I think Christian Pulisic is going to be fine. I think he's going to continue to develop. And I think he's going to be back amongst the assists and the goals at a greater rate. Just as I think that the probability that Jadon Sancho's rate slows down, probably pretty good. He's found himself in really, really good situations here the last few weeks. And he also specifically got an assist or 3 against that in that game against Nuremberg when Dortmund won 7-0. Mm-hmm. So you have the situation where it seems like the traffic is going Sancho's way, and maybe it is. Sancho is a great player, and I don't want to take anything away from him. But I think that concern that is a problem for Pulisic ultimately is a bit overblown. I think that a similar thing happened with Dortmund fans too when you had the rise of Ousmane Dembele.
Yeah.
But I think that Christian Pulisic played better when Ousmane Dembele was on the field. I think that having 2 of those people on the field as opposed to just one main creative attacking winger, when you have a couple of those people, is ultimately good for both because it forces teams to divide their attentions. So all that to say, Christian Pulisic, while he might not be banging in the goals and chipping in the assists at the same rate that Jadon Sancho is right now, I think that the concern or the fear that Jadon Sancho's rise is going to lead to Christian Pulisic becoming an afterthought or his growth being stunted in some sort of way is overblown at this point.
So I've got one more Pulisic question for you. As someone who probably watches him a lot more than the average US men's national team fan, what are the flaws in his game that you see that will sort of disappear, or things he can improve on as he develops? Because I think you make a good point that he's only 20 and we almost think of him as the finished product just because he's the most famous player on our team right now, on our national team. So I guess I'm asking you, what does his development look like over, say, the next 3 or 4 years? What gets better?
Development-wise, the decision process behind how you beat a defender and when to get rid of the ball. I think that's a big thing for him, specifically with Dortmund, but that is only going to benefit all facets of his game and any team that he plays for. Pulisic is a guy that is very good at one-on-one. He loves to attack people, and he was one of the people in Europe last year. I think he was in the top 5 or 3 of attempted take-ons. But he's also a person who, and especially this season so far, like I said before, he's tried to beat one too many people on a run. You'll see him do that a bunch. And being able to be a little bit smarter about how many people you really need to beat and when is a good time to kind of possibly back off and just keep possession for your team and not try to really force the issue, is something that he can probably work on. And in a similar way, being able to really know when to force the issue with your passes and when to just try to build a rhythm and keep more possession. I think that's been a case too of him with the U.S. national team, where you'll see him just get into these little pockets of the game where he's really trying to release a player or make a particularly clever flick or something like that, and he's just not connecting. Yeah. And it's in the zone of the game where it really would more benefit the team to possibly make a safer pass and keep building their rhythm.
I think about the game in Philadelphia, or more accurately, Chester, Pennsylvania, that you and I went to, where the US played Bolivia, and it was kind of like a big homecoming US men's national team appearance for Pulisic in a weak Bolivia team. And not that he was bad, but I definitely remember thinking, he's trying too hard to make something happen in this game.
Yeah, it seemed, specifically in that game, first of all, Christian Pulisic looked tired.
Yeah.
And which is understandable. He had played a billion games for Dortmund that season. And he was just coming off of another, a U.S. end of the season tour that Dortmund was making, which was kind of weird, actually, that they went and did a tour of the U.S. right after the season ended. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like he really wanted to make something happen for the crowd in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Obviously, Christian Pulisic is from Hershey, which is only an hour and a half to 2 hours down the road from Philly. So about the same as Chester. Huh?
About the same as Chester.
Yeah.
I'm joking. It just felt a really long way when we went
yeah. And you got the idea that maybe he wanted to make something happen, but it was like trying to force the issue when possibly just building a rhythm and waiting for a better opportunity to present itself might be more beneficial.
Yeah, this may be an unfair comparison, obviously, because I'm about to talk about Leo Messi. But I remember Taylor and I, for the show, we watched Barcelona versus Sevilla a couple of weeks ago. And we were really impressed by Messi's ability. I mean, he was only on the field 15 minutes, right, before he broke his arm. But we just kept seeing that thing where he knows that people are going to be drawn towards him to try and defend him. And he always uses that to create space and then set other people free. And I've just realised that in my head, I think that's what I'd like to see Pulisic do when he goes on one of those dribbles, to be aware of when the moment is that everything starts to converge around him. And then you release it and give it to someone else. Yeah,
Christian Pulisic doesn't need to enter God mode every single time that he, goes on a dribble.
Yeah, I thought he looks like he thinks he's eaten one of those Super Mario Brothers invincibility stars, and he's just on an endless run.
Yeah. And I think the next step for his development is becoming a little bit more comfortable with the players around him, and this, making sure that you can let the game come to you a little bit more. Not every single situation requires you to, kind of beat it into submission with the sheer quality of your dribbles.
All right, so I'm going to exhaust all the Pulisic questions because we also got a question via Twitter from Ben Harold. He asked, is there any chance that Christian Pulisic gets a chance to spell Marco Reus or Mario Götze as the number 10 at Borussia Dortmund? I think that's a very US fan question as well, right? Like, do we get to see Pulisic ever play as the central attacking midfielder instead of on the wing?
That's an extremely US fan question, mostly because the chances that we see Pulisic play that position for the United States is extremely high. I would be shocked if in the next year, and especially when we get to the Gold Cup, when I expect to see Pulisic with this upcoming Gold Cup, which if the U.S. wins, they go to the Confederations Cup outright without having to play the playoff. I expect to see a first-choice U.S. team, which includes Christian Pulisic, and I would be shocked if at some point he doesn't play that attacking midfielder role, kind of that classic number 10 middle of the field, the guy with the ideas kind of thing. Does he play it at Dortmund? I think if he plays it at Dortmund, it's most likely going to be because of an injury of some sort.
So we'd have to have Götze and Reus and maybe Kagawa. They'd all have to go down.
Yeah, Kagawa just came back from injury. And it seemed at the beginning of the season like Mario Götze might actually be falling out of favor or not play a role under Lucien Favre, and he's since kind of rectified that and turned it back on a bit in his play and made himself more of a player that can be relied upon in these last few weeks.
Yeah, I've seen some beautiful passes from him in the last few weeks. Some really sort of inventive passes that you didn't see come in, and like perfectly weighted through balls that he's been knocking through. Yeah.
So I think that if Christian Pulisic is to play that position for Dortmund, it would probably be because of an injury of some sort. Which, considering that two of the people in front of them are Marco Reus and Mario Götze, isn't remotely out of the realm of possibility. But I would foresee the need for a injury for that to really happen at Dortmund.
So even in my US fandom, I would not wish any more injuries on Reus and Götze. Those poor men have suffered enough, right?
Yep. and part of the reason that Dortmund has done as well as they have at the beginning of the season is you have the rise of Jadon Sancho, you have the ridiculous efficiency of Paco Alcacer, but you also have Marco Reus really returning to that upper echelon of German playmaker.
Yeah.
He has really returned to the place that Dortmund needs him to be at if they're going to continue to build teams around him. There was a couple of maybe it might have been mildly heretical among Dortmund fans because Marco Reus is so revered. But there was a couple of suggestions, we'll say, of maybe let's see what happens if we don't start Marco Reus. Like, what does that look like? And Marco Reus, I think, especially specifically since the Hoffenheim game, has really put that talk to bed with his play. He has been outstanding for them. So yeah, certainly don't wish any more injuries on either of those two, and the injury history that they have had.
So I want to stick in the attacking third before we talk defenders, and I want to talk about Alcácer. So my understanding is he's on loan from Barcelona with an option to buy. Do you assume that Dortmund will take that option to buy, given the number of goals he's managed to score in somewhat limited minutes?
I mean, the only possible reason that Dortmund should not buy Alcácer is if these little injuries that have kind of plagued him at the beginning of the season, and he was coming in from the off season with an injury, so it was also, a matter of him getting into fitness and then coming down with a different injury, and that sort of thing. If one of those things turned out to be more serious or a truly chronic issue, then maybe you think twice. But otherwise, I have absolutely no idea why you would think twice if you're Dortmund of buying him, because he has been, he's been ridiculous. He's been the fastest. There was something that was last season, Michy Batshuayi, when he came from Chelsea, set a record, I think, for Dortmund, possibly for the entire Bundesliga, but I think for Dortmund of fastest to 6 or 8 goals or something like that. And Alcácer has eclipsed it utterly. It was 400 some minutes for Batshuayi, and Alcácer has only played 180. He has been, he's been nothing short of phenomenal, and a lot of it even is not a ridiculous, some sort of, miraculous play. A lot of it is just he is a forward playing as a forward, which was something that Dortmund was desperately missing at the beginning of the season.
I see.
You had Maxi Philipp that was filling in a lot at forward, and he's not really a natural center forward. Well, he's not a lone striker. That's not the player he is. You saw Marco Reus playing forward with Mario Götze behind him, which was a really weird combination because they both wanted to play in the same spaces on the field. Mm-hmm. It's when Marco Reus plays forward, he's a little bit more of a false nine. And when Mario Götze plays attacking midfielder, he is more of a very advanced attacking midfielder. And it wasn't until very recently that those two kind of figured that out. Paco Alcácer has come in. He's come in with valuable hold-up play, meaningful stuff in possession. He's come with great runs and spacing and the ability to really stretch out defenses. And he has come in with a little bit of magic touch in some of these situations. You look at the free kick against Augsburg in the 95th minute or something to win 4-3. And a couple of these finishes have been ridiculous. So the rise of Paco Alcácer, I don't know. If you're Dortmund, I don't know why you don't try to buy him. It doesn't make any sense to me to not buy him.
Let's talk back line. I've been really excited, but also as a Dortmund, not a fan, but I want Dortmund to do well because of Christian Pulisic. But then so excited and a little bit concerned about Achraf Hakimi. Because to me, he seems to offer all sorts going forward and problems when defending. Is that a fair summary?
I think so. Achraf Hakimi, the good of Achraf Hakimi, and to a slightly lesser extent, the good of several of these BVB defenders. He's a young guy. He's clearly got wheels. He's got ideas in attack. But he does just have some head scratchers every now and then. of like you just watch him play and you're like, you have so much potential, but also what were you doing there? I think the big one was Achraf Hakimi could have been like the Dortmund's player of the game against Atletico, except for the moment. It was actually an attack. The moment where Marco Reus had made a ridiculous touch to free himself and to really, he was going to have a 1v1 with the keeper. And Achraf Hakimi had kind of come alongside him like he was waiting for the pass, and then just kind of casually ran in front of him and took the ball off of Marco Reus's foot and then missed. And it was like, I mean, everybody in the world was saying, what are you doing in this situation? He has some of those moments.
And he's a wild card. I think that's why I kind of like him.
I mean, maybe so. And you know, Dortmund has a lot of injuries along the back line right now. And the reason that Hakimi has been playing so much lately is because you have an injury to Marcel Schmelzer, as well as to Jeremy Tolian, who is somebody that was playing a lot of right back at the beginning of the season.
Oh, I'd forgotten about him. I completely forgot about Jeremy Tolian.
He's still on squad. And so you have these guys who are hurt, and actually Dortmund also earlier in this game had to sub out Abdou Diallo due to injury. So they're still very much kind of the walking wounded in a lot of these games along the back line. But yeah, Achraf Hakimi is a guy that you wonder if Dortmund at the end of the season will try to make some sort of run at and say, you know, hey, Madrid, we want to buy you. We want to buy this guy. Or if they're kind of content to let it go. I think that he has a lot more X factors in attack than a guy like Marcel Schmelzer does, certainly, and also Lucas Piszczek, who are two guys who have, you know, they've given everything they have for Dortmund.
They're from like the club era, right? They've been around.
Yeah, they've been here for forever. Lucas Piszczek and Marcel Schmelzer are as dear to the Dortmund faithful as any Dortmund player. But both of them are also clearly on the downside or about to enter the downside of their career. They're not at a point where they're going to get any better, and at this point, they can only hope to kind of keep plateauing what they have. And so you need people to step up. Similar to, you know, how Lucien Favre finally addressed the center back situation, which kind of was bad ever since Mats Hummels left and never really got addressed until you saw Favre really, you know, you bring in Manuel Akanji, you bring in Abdou Diallo, you let Dan Axel Zagadou actually play center back as opposed to playing him as a left back, which happened last season. Yeah,
I thought it was really unfair to make him the world's tallest left back last season.
Oh man, and you know, he goes into center back, and it's like, this is what everybody sees in you. This is why you're there, and you know, he's still only 19. Like that kid has real potential to be great, but it just seemed like there was this refusal to really address a lot of the defensive issues that was plaguing Dortmund for a long time. And at some point you have to trust your kids. And Dortmund are generally really good at that, but it seemed like they were resisting it on defense for a really long time. And Favre came in and actually started playing these people. Some of it, his hand was forced due to injuries, but you now have, at the very least, the question of when the Dortmund back line is healthy, who is starting? Who is actually starting? Because for the longest time, Lucas Piszczek and Marcel Schmelzer have been absolute locks to start at outside back. And now I don't know.
How is Manuel Akanji doing? Because I became a big fan of his during the World Cup. I think he's sort of like what I would think of as almost like a complete centre-back. He's got nothing that you could that I would identify as being a downside. You know, like he's great with the ball, covers ground quickly, good enough in the air, all that kind of stuff. How has he done for Dortmund this year?
He has done okay. And it's a little bit the pairing he has been hurt for the last couple of weeks, and it's almost a little unfair because as soon as he got hurt and you had the pairing of Dan Zagadou and Abdou Diallo show up, that pairing has done really well. But it also coincided, I think, with Dortmund figuring out Favre's system a little bit better and them settling into that a little bit more. Because at the beginning of the year, there were plenty of times when the defense was suspect. And Manuel Akanji was not blameless in that. He made his share of mistakes there. So it's hard to gauge exactly where he is at on the depth chart. I think that if everybody is healthy, Favre starts him, most likely. But I think that the book is a little bit still out on Manuel Akanji with Dortmund. I think he certainly has the talent, and I like his game as a player. I think that we'll just see when everybody is healthy if somebody cracks this Abdou Diallo, Dan Zagadou pairing.
Okay, my final question before I fire some quick Twitter questions at you. Do you think this Borussia Dortmund team is good enough to put up a proper title challenge? I'm essentially asking, is this a flash in the pan start to the season, or do you see something there that is good enough to go all the way through the Bundesliga, even if Bayern Munich start sort of really getting themselves into proper Bayern Munich form?
You know, one of the things that marked a lot of Klopp's teams, and even to a certain extent some of Thomas Tuchel's teams that has been missing from Dortmund, was this ability and belief about the squad that really, it never seemed like they were out of the game. And it never, even if they were down a couple of goals, or it seemed like the run of play was going against them, you really got the sense that, like, at any given moment we could score. At any given moment we could win this game, and it's and that's possible. And I think that went away a little bit in the last couple of seasons, and certainly last season, you kind of had Dortmund last season, qualified for the Champions League almost in spite of themselves. That belief and that feeling in the stadium is there this year. They have this ability to just turn up in the right place at the right time, and also, I mean, even improve when things aren't going well, or things are not going in their favor during the game. I've already seen improvement and a clear, like, greater comfort in Dortmund and in Lucien Favre's system and the things that he is trying to do with them as the season has progressed. So to answer that question, and coupling with Bayern Munich's struggles to open the season and how they have seemed far from indestructible under new coach Niko Kovac, I certainly think that Dortmund can win the Bundesliga this year. I think that they can definitely go all the way. They're not a perfect team by any means. They're a team that is going to score often and be scored on often still, I think. But
so it makes them worth watching, right?
Huh?
That's what makes them worth watching. There's always goals.
Absolutely. They're a neutral fan's dream. But yeah, I think they do have what it takes to win the Bundesliga this year, and to also surprise some teams in the Champions League with just how much a lot of different teams are struggling in the top leagues.
Yeah.
You watch the Champions League, and even the teams that are like, this team seems like it should be a dyed-in-the-wool absolute favorite. A team like Manchester City losing to Lyon. You have Liverpool.
Real Madrid losing to Cesca.
Liverpool hasn't really taken over the league like they want to take over the league in England, even though they've done fairly well in the Champions League up to this point. So I think that Dortmund can win the Bundesliga, and I think that they also have the potential to jump on a team and surprise them, much in the vein of some of those Klopp classics against Real Madrid there in like 2011, 2012, 2013. I think that Dortmund has that ability.
All right, I have a live update for you. So Dortmund are now winning 2-1 against Union Berlin. Max Felipe scored with a Christian Pulisic assist. And I've just pulled up Twitter, And Joseph Lowry, do you know him? At Joe Cleats on Twitter. There is a clever final ball from Christian Pulisic where he draws people in and then slips Max Philippe in to put him in on goal. So Pulisic must have heard our conversation and decided to go out and show us that he can do it.
But, Jadon Sancho has scored a lot of goals, so it must mean that Christian Pulisic's career is over, and that's the narrative I'm going to stick with.
I've got some final Twitter questions to fire at you. So this is like a quick fire round. You ready? Matt wants to know, will Borussia Dortmund ever stop being a selling club?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to say it's hard because, there are different definitions of what a selling club truly is. Mm-hmm. I think that lately, the last couple of seasons, there has been a small shift away from the automatic selling of really, really top talent and more of how do we maximize a talent that is in their prime but might be coming to the end of that usefulness, a la the sell of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang.
Right. So sell at the top of the market.
Yeah, I don't think that... I mean, you're going to get times when you sell a player because it just makes the most sense. If, Manchester City come back with a massive offer for Jadon Sancho, why don't you take that when you still have Christian Pulisic and Jacob Brun-Larsen and, even further down the pipeline, people like Sergi Gomez who are just waiting for their chance. Yeah. You've got players there. Why not make that thing?
There may even be a buyback clause with Jadon Sancho, right? I think Man City may have an option on him.
There are rumors that Man City has a buyback clause and Dortmund has denied that they have a buyback.
Okay.
So there's some gray area there. We're not sure.
Zorc's a smart guy, right? The sporting director, is it Michael Zorc? I think I would back him to have negotiated that correctly.
Yeah, I believe in him, and especially his business acumen.
Okay, next question. Costa Kaliagas says, is there a legitimate threat that this Dortmund team starts a dynasty or a dynasty? Meaning, I guess, all these young players, it's similar to Matt's question in some ways. Do they stick together and become this team that, can win, say, 3 out of 5 Bundesligas in the next few years?
And that's tied very much into the last question of does Dortmund becoming a selling club? They have what it takes, obviously, but they've also had, the last, even in the seasons where they haven't done as well, they've had, this idea where this is the makings of a dynasty if all these players stay.
Yeah.
At the moment, it feels like, you have Marco Reus, who's just going to stay. That's what he does and who he is, and he is going to stay. You get the feeling that possibly Pulisic might become another one of those people. I don't necessarily expect Jadon Sancho to stay, especially if he continues anything remotely close to this pace. I think that somebody comes, offers a number that's just too big to pass up, and Dortmund take it. But what's interesting about this club right now is that the people that are important and the people that, are people that who's the most valuable players on this squad, aren't there? It doesn't feel like there's a ton of people that people like Bayern Munich would really want to poach. Who
are you referring to?
You would think about do you really want to go and sign Axel Witsel, who is a guy that in his mid to late 20s. So maybe you do. Do you really want to go and sign Mo Dahoud, who is good but also very inconsistent, and he's kind of an X factor in that way for Dortmund. There was a lot of talk, the last couple of seasons that Bayern Munich should go after Christian Pulisic because he'd be a good replacement for guys like Frank Ribery and for Arjen Robben. But do you do that when you already have Kingsley Coman or somebody, other people that are the same but that you might be able to get for less money? It doesn't seem like there is, outside of Jadon Sancho, a very obvious poach right now. And if Dortmund continue to win, if they win the Bundesliga, that's going to make it very attractive for a lot of these younger players to stay. Because after Dortmund won the Bundesliga a couple times, Mario Götze leaves for Bayern Munich, right?
Yeah.
But they don't get to the point where you have a mass exodus of Mats Hummels leaving, Ilkay Gundogan leaving, Henrik Mkhitaryan leaving, until you go a couple of seasons where results aren't going their way. And
I see. Yeah, so it's more about happiness or enjoying winning, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's, more of the X factor there for Dortmund. Maybe they will never be a club that can offer wages like the Barcelonas and the PSGs of the world. But if you're winning and you're getting to places that are competitive in the Champions League, and you are playing, more importantly, you're actually playing a part in that, as opposed to, am I going to go to Barcelona and become a substitute, a la Ousmane Dembele? That can be kind of an X factor that Dortmund uses to keep some of these players.
Got it. All right, final question is looking to the future, and it sort of brings us full circle in terms of how you first got interested in Dortmund with Americans over there. Mr. Front Page on Twitter asks, is Gio Reyna going to Borussia Dortmund?
Here's what we know about Gio Reyna, outside of the obvious scouting reports. Gio Reyna has a European passport. He has a Portuguese passport through one of his grandparents, which means he can sign with a European team when he turns 16. We know that he is turning 16 on November 13th, so in like 2 weeks. We don't know for absolute certain that he's going to sign with Dortmund, but it feels pretty likely. And I don't think that we're going to get confirmation of that actually happening until he's actually in Germany signing the dotted line.
Yeah.
Gio Reyna is a guy, especially, in terms of like the U.S. soccer sphere, he's a guy that Brass and his team are going to seek to protect a little bit more. He is the crown jewel of his age group right now. And not only that, you're Claudio Reyna's kid. Like, you were clearly born to be an American superstar in some regard or another. It seems a little bit obvious to me that they would try to, play that a little bit close to the chest with him. I love Gio Reyna's game. He is a person that, obviously is still incredibly young, is still developing as a player, and if he goes to Dortmund, we'll see where he ends up as a player. Right now, he is an incredibly smooth central midfielder. Not to like trigger people or give people bad memories. A lot of his games reminds me of like a slightly more high energy Gideon Zalalem, and just the way that he plays. He's very, very smooth on the ball when he beats people. It's not like the Christian Pulisic super burst of pace that's just kind of electric. It's his step and the way he moves the ball. It's just kind of languid and really, really pretty to watch. He's got great vision. He's got great passing and wonderful technique for how young he is. And so we'll see. We'll see if he ends up as kind of a classic number 10. We'll see if he becomes a winger, because Christian Pulisic was a classic number 10 for all these U.S. youth teams and played there extensively for the U.S. before he signed with Dortmund, and then he became a winger there. But will Gio Reyna sign with Dortmund? I think probably, and I think that we will get that news either one way or the other in the next 2 weeks. But either way, I think that, I think he'd be a great fit for Dortmund, but Gio Reyna is a person that isn't long for the U.S. and for NYCFC. I think he will end up in Europe eventually, if not sooner than later.
All right. Well, Adam Whittaker Snavely, a.k.a. Snaves, thank you. Snaves, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. We went longer than I expected, but I think there's a lot of really good Borussia Dortmund stuff in there. So I'm hoping our listeners enjoy it.
Great.
If they do, and people are inspired to read your stuff, what's the best way? Is it to follow you on Twitter? Like, what's the best way for people to keep track of what you're doing?
I am very online. So Twitter is usually... I'm a very online person. Twitter is usually a really good place to keep track of what I'm doing. If you're not following The Athletic itself, then following what I'm doing and what I'm writing and more of my soccer thoughts, following me on Twitter is probably the best way. So if you want to drop me a follow, it's at Snaves, Snaves. That's probably the best way to follow me.
All right. Well, thanks again for taking the time. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Daryl. It was a lot of fun.